After graduating from the University of Washington and after attending law school at the University of California, Whitney Harris started his career at a small law firm in 1936 in Los Angeles. But that all changed once the United States entered World War II. Harris, who was 30 years old at the time, was called to active duty. He entered the United States Navy as an ensign in 1942 and served as a line officer throughout the war.
I was eventually invited toward the end of the war by the military to join OSS, the Office of Strategic Services. And then I was placed in charge of the investigation of war crimes in the European theater by OSS.
As the war came to a close, details of Nazi Germany's war crimes began to surface. When the prosecution began, Harris would remain in Europe.
From time to time, I brought them documents which I had obtained in the course of my investigations, which were incriminating against the leading Nazis. And eventually, as it turned out, the agreement was signed and I was invited to join the staff as a prosecutor.
With the Nuremberg trials underway, Harris began collecting as much documentary evidence as possible.
We found that we had a large volume of incriminating documents which had been signed by the Nazi leaders, and this turned out to be the core of our case. And that provided a strong basis, a basis that could not be challenged by the Nazis really, and could not be questioned in history.
Throughout the course of the trials, Harris interrogated several Nazi leaders, but the most disturbing remarks came from a leading member of the Nazi Party, Otto Ohlendorf.
He started out, he said, Ohlendorf, he said, are you telling us now that the Nazis murdered the Jewish people? And Ohlendorf said, well, yes, we did. And he said, well, did that include children? And he said, yes, that included the children. And so he said, why were the children murdered? He said, those were our orders to destroy all of the Jewish people. I thought that was the most dramatic event in the entire trial.
Whitney Harris faced the difficult task of putting his emotions aside and doing his job.
For the first time, it's disclosed that men actually murdered millions of other people. How could this be? You don't collapse. It's a fact, and you deal with that fact and the reality of it, and try to develop the absolute truth and the proof of the truth which will stand in history. One of the things that helps getting through an event like this in your lifetime is your background, is your training. What kind of a person were you, for example, in your fraternity? You had conflict sometimes with your fraternity brothers. How did you handle that? That helped to lay a basis for meeting the other challenges in life as they come along.